people love to stick their neck into like hornets' nests.
Of the many criticisms I was left with after watching Game of Thrones, in places, I think for me, it did at least manage to be sexy. Like Jon Snow and Ygritte, or Robb Stark and Talisa, even maybe Shae and Tyrion managed it in places. Sadly, the same cannot be said of House the Dragon. And now that I look back at the relationships in Game of Thrones, they maybe were a bit cookie cutter. Now that I write them all out, they all kind of started out the same way and went the same way. They all started out confrontational and grew into romance. How did I not see that before? Game of Thrones seems to have had the same structure in their sexual relationships over and over again. When Jon Snow met Ygritte, there was a battle and he captured her. When Robb Stark met Talisa, she was angry with him because she was having to treat the wounded after a battle he started. Shae was angry at Tyrion at first because she'd essentially been grabbed in the middle of the night. Arya was very harsh with Gendry at first. Jaime Lannister and Brienne of Tarth. And hang on, it's always the women that are angry too. This is a thing, isn't it? This is a thing in Japanese writing and fiction. I've seen it in anime and manga. It's a character development process that depicts a character with a personality who is initially very harsh before gradually showing a warmer, friendlier side over time. It's called Tsundere. If you don't know the term, the word is Japanese, and according to Wiki, it's derived from the terms sun, to turn away in disgust and anger, and dere to become affectionate. How have I not seen that before? Now I think about it, I've seen it quite a few times in women in the real world too. And they basically, now that I think about it, tell the same love story over and over again in Game of Thrones. A man and a woman meet, there's mutual attraction. The woman is aggressive and angry but softens over time, and nobody ever seems to get a happily ever after. Ygritte tries to kill Jon Snow and gets killed herself. Robb and Talisa die at the Red Wedding. Tyrion kills Shae after her betrayal. Jon kills Dany. Arya leaves Gendry. Jaime leaves Brienne. Dany leaves Dario. And talking about that, what even happened to Dario Naharis? He got left behind by Dany as caretaker in Slaver's Bay, and that was the last we ever saw of him. What a terrible way to end his character arc. I'll also never forgive the TV series for dropping the character of Strong Belwas from the show version. This constant need to subvert expectations is frankly getting very stale. If you do it every time, it becomes just as predictable as fan service. And when you do subvert someone's expectations, you're supposed to do it in a good way. It's like me going to a bar, ordering a drink, and a hot barmaid slips me her number on a napkin. That's subverting my expectations in a good way. If I order a drink and instead she kicks me in the crotch, that will still be a surprise, but it won't be so welcome. Anyway, I digress. I was saying, Game of Thrones could be sexy at times. If I was not turned on before I started watching an episode of Game of Thrones, there are scenes in it that could maybe turn me on by the end of the show. I mean, just that scene when Natalie Dormer tried her best to seduce Renly in Game of Thrones almost sent my boxer shorts flying across the room like Barbara Windsor's bra in Carry On Camping.
Fling and in, and fling. Matron, take them away.
Sadly though, it didn't work for Renly. He only had eyes for a brother, but if there ever were a test for if someone is gay or not, that could be it. House the Dragon, on the other hand, is the opposite. I could start watching any episode of season 1 of House the Dragon turned on, and by the end, it would have been like I'd had an ice cold shower. It is, if anything, anti-sexy. Even that scene in Game of Thrones where Melisandre put leeches on Gendry was sexier than House of the Dragon. That at least had Carice Van Houten in it. But on the other hand, the show can be enjoyed on many levels. I watched the episode with other people again and asked them afterwards what they thought of it. One man in the group predictably again said, "I thought it was good. There was a lot of good dragon action." And one woman said that she didn't really care for it. I asked her why, and she said, because the little dragon got ate. So, where did I leave off last time? Oh yes, it was that god-awful scene where Rhaenyra presumably Fred Flintstones down her dragon's neck, presumably carefully avoiding all of the spines, and walked right through her enemies with nary a care in the world, just trusting them not to kill her. And this has given me flashbacks to late Game of Thrones again, and that terrible scene where Daenerys went to King's Landing and stood in front of several giant siege crossbows. The same giant crossbows that have been shown could bullseye a dragon from several kilometres away. So Daenerys stood still a few hundred metres away and just relied on Cersei Lannister choosing not to kill her. Otto delivers his message that he wants Rhaenyra to submit to Aegon's rule, and in return she can keep everything that she has. He then leaves, and Rhaenyra lets them go in peace, against Daemon's very reasonable wishes to kill everyone. They go back inside, and later Rhaenyra tries to explain to Daemon about the Song of Ice and Fire, how the realm must be united against the dark, and I still can't believe they're going there. The Night King was a damp squib. For Pete's sake, stop reminding me of the bad parts of Game of Thrones. Arya King and the Night King was a disastrous end to multiple story arcs. Daemon gets bored of listening to Rhaenyra tell him about prophecy, so he decides, very rationally and very heroically, to just choke a bitch like he's a pimp and she owes him money. The problem with this being that she isn't a hoe and he isn't a pimp. She's his wife who just miscarried, and also now the Queen of the Seven Kingdoms. I mean, oh my, I can see why this character's making some of the ladies swoon. Meanwhile, Corlys is being told by his wife Rhaenys about what's happened while he was sick. He's told about the king's death, about Aegon's coronation, and that his brother is dead, killed by Daemon. And frankly, he doesn't even seem very bothered. He's fed up with it all and decides to pledge for neither the Greens or the Blacks. This is until his wife points out that this is hardly an option, because even if their house stays out of it, their grandchildren don't have that luxury. So Corlys goes to join Daemon and Rhaenyra's faction, despite him thinking that they killed his son, and despite knowing that Daemon killed his brother, on the grounds that Rhaenyra is trying to avoid war, which is not much justification, because so's Alicent. So Daemon may be even worse off than Isildur from the Rings of Power. At least Isildur had a horse that cared about him. Daemon is dead, and everyone, including his brother, essentially say, oh well. Corlys tells Rhaenyra, our houses are bound by common blood and common cause. And this makes little sense, because the Greens faction are relatives of his as well. This is nonsense. But Corlys joins their faction. Let's see now. So Corlys joins the Blacks. Showrunners, did it not occur to you that this could maybe come across as a bit racist? I still think if they were going to race swap characters, the Hightowers would have been a far better option than the Valerians. It would have avoided all this and the parentage farce. So Rhaenyra sends envoys on dragons to allied houses. Jace goes to Winterfell, Daemon to Riverrun, and Luke to Storm's End to try and garner their support. Rhaenyra says that if it's to be war, they will not strike the first blow. Her sons swear to not start any fights and just go to deliver the messages. The camera focuses on Jacaerys as he goes to Storm's End in the middle of a storm and lands. And there's already a big bloody dragon there. He walks in and, oh dear, Aemond is there already, treating with Lord Baratheon. And Aemond has already made a better offer of marriages in exchange for the Baratheon's support. Luke, on the other hand, is empty-handed, so Lord Baratheon tells him to get lost. So Luke turns to leave to take the Baratheon's refusal back to his mother, and Aemond tells him to wait. He wants one of Luke's eyes in return for the one he lost when Luke hit him with a knife, and one way or another, he means to have it. Lord Baratheon says that this will not happen under his roof, so Luke leaves, and he really shouldn't have dawdled. Luke goes back to his dragon in the middle of the storm, and the CGI looks off somehow. The lighting on Lucerys doesn't seem to match the rest of the scene. Luke takes off and is pursued by Aemond on his dragon, still determined to have one of Luke's eyes. There's a chase as Aemond makes his dragon pursue to torment his younger relative. Partway through the chase, Luke loses control of his dragon as it panics and spits a gout of flame into the face of Aemond's much larger dragon. And then Aemond loses control of his dragon and he cannot stop it as it closes in on Luke and his dragon. The episode ends with Aemond's dragon eating Luke and his smaller dragon, biting it into pieces, as Aemond makes a shocked "what have I done" face, knowing that what he's done is probably start a war. And that's it for season 1. So, on the whole, what do I make of it? There's a good story in there, and technically it doesn't do much wrong, but it gets undermined by the time skips, the character changes, the grim tone of the second half of the season, and for me, it falls well short of the quality shown in early seasons of Game of Thrones.
Could you make me a cup of tea, please, Stephanie?